Welcome back to day 43 of our chess journey to 1500 ELO on chess.com. Now let's just get started and jump on into our game here and find an opponent. We get, I think this is our first Scottish opponent, Flute Stewart from Scotland. We go into the Sicilian. And what will they play? The Bowdler attack. This is not a good move because it allows us to kick the bishop back, and they would have to move it back, and then they lose their first move advantage. I do think a knight move here is considered the best move, but I can't remember what happens here. And this might be a move, but I'm not quite sure. So let's go e6 and prepare for d5 here. They push the pawn, which I guess explains why a knight move was indeed the best move, to prevent this pawn push. But do we have a way of punishing this move? Let's have a look here. This could be played, and this is not a move, I think. So I think the most likely response here would be this knight move up here. Are we then able to attack this pawn again? I think yes. And we could just apply pressure and try to win the pawn. So I think we'll start out with knight to c6 here and see how things progress. They do push this pawn here though, which might be a really weakening move. First of all, this is what I'm seeing. This pawn should be falling, as this is a fork on the king and the pawn, and there is no way of defending both. So let's go on ahead here and grab this pawn. Or yeah, this was a bit hasty. For some reason I missed this idea, but now I think, despite this pawn chain looking a bit strong, it might be difficult for our opponent to avoid weaknesses here. Those light squares are looking juicy. And if we do chip away at some things here, I think we could get a decent position. Yeah, this was, as I mentioned, a bit too quick. For some reason I didn't see this move. But that's okay, we'll drop back. We'll just have to decide on which square. Do we go all the way back? Is this an idea? I think going all the way back might be an okay move, or rather the best move to play for something like this perhaps. I am looking at ideas like this, playing for this and occupying this diagonal. Now if we do play d5, I'm honestly not quite convinced. I would like to dislodge this pawn here, as it's just hindering our development. Yeah, I'm not seeing a good alternative. It's going to be difficult to play our pieces out here if we don't dislodge this pawn. Now this might be played. but I'm expecting our opponent to maybe defend this pawn. Or they might just keep on developing normally, getting their bishop out like this, for example, or getting their knight out. I think this is going to be a really instructive, I was going to say, yeah, game review afterwards, because I'm sure we have made some mistake here, at least one. However, there should be a lot to learn from this. I don't think we're in a horrible spot though, it's just we are a bit cramped right now and we are lacking development. They capture, and now we have to decide which way we recapture. So this recapture, I think, first of all, I'm looking at this simply so we could get our pieces out as quickly as possible and castle. We don't need our bishop to be here. However, this diagonal here might be good for our bishop. But do we have time to play like that? There could be an argument here for playing. I think we might have time to play like this. I'm not seeing any immediate threats, and I think we are actually quite solid for the time being at least. So I would like to occupy this diagonal, and thus I'll take with the queen here. The knight gets developed, and now I think a6 here might be a good move, simply to take away this idea and this pin. What could our opponent do in response? Is this a move? I think it would allow us to fork their pieces, after which this pawn move might have to be played, but that would aid their development. So if we get this, we might just drop back instead, and then keep on developing. Regardless, I think I would like to include a6 here, to avoid any shenanigans here on the b5 square. And now we might have ideas of b5, but we do have to be careful. We can't just delay our development forever. We get a4 here, and I think we'll go on ahead and keep on developing. But what would our best ideas here be? I think either one of those moves or g6 to get this diagonal. Do we have alternatives? I would like to play this, dislodging the bishop from their diagonal, but we don't have this because of this knight. So let's just not play tactically right now, we should just develop. I do have to remind myself not to make any mistakes here. Of those two moves here, I think I prefer this, because we get access to the g4 square, being able to jump into their position here. And we could jump into this square, which might be the idea of this move anyways. This also prevents g4 perhaps, as we could capture. And this might look a bit scary, but I think we would be fine here. We would just drop back and push g6. And now we get this move. Our opponent is preparing to castle queenside. But this is quite committal in a sense, because now they can't easily shut down the dark square diagonal here. Unless they decide to play like this, which would weaken their king a whole lot. Do we have any alternatives to g6? I would like to argue for us to just jump into their position here and trade pieces, but this I think would not benefit us. We don't have enough development. So we will go on ahead and just continue with our plans and let our opponent do the same. If we do get to consolidate here and get our pieces out, I think we should be in an okay spot. So this might target this pawn, but it's currently defended, and I don't think our opponent could easily dislodge our defense of this pawn. We might even go back here if they try to play this, but if they go for this, we have this. So now they play their queen out. Now this would force a trade at least. What happens here? I don't think this would favor us, but we might just keep this as an idea in our position here and keep on going like this. Now what would happen if they try to pin our pawn here? Then we would just castle, and if they take, we take back with this bishop and develop, I think. We do have a lot of defenses here. And here there might be an argument for taking like this, but that's quite scary. I wouldn't want to open up our king all that easily, although it's not committed here. This side seems a bit dangerous, simply because of our pawn structure and our king being stranded on c8 after castling. Now this is a move, but I'm not seeing a good continuation here. We could push the knight back if they jump in. But there are a lot of ideas here for our opponent. We just want to get to safety, I think, as quickly as possible. Now I do want to ask ourselves here, do we have this, this, and this? Or perhaps an immediate attack on this bishop? I think we will not attack just now, but after this I think we might go in, and this would reveal an attack on this knight here, where we could double up their pawns and mess up their queen side where they would be castled. So let's just go on ahead and castle first to get to safety. Now we don't have to worry about pins like this either, because our king is currently quite safe. Now we do have to be careful about opening up potential forks like this. If this bishop wasn't here, then this would be dangerous for us. Our opponent decides to castle here, and we might try to play this. Now, does this knight have any important things it defends right now? Well, if we play this, our opponent might have this in-between move. And I think we would have to respond to it. But if we get this and this, I would have liked to say we would go back here and redirect our pieces here in another direction, but I don't quite see that happening. So if we can't play this move because of this, should we just play something else first? I would like to play like this, I think, because I think we need to defend our pawn here, because there might be some ideas here where they dislodge our queen, and this pawn here on c6 would be left, c5 rather, would be left hanging. We can't play b5 here, so we have to play the more defensive option. But our main idea here is getting our bishop onto a good diagonal. Now, what would I play here as our opponent? There might be an argument, I think, for just going for a pawn avalanche here on our king side, which might be scary to play against. But we might have an attack looming ourselves too on their queen side. Or potentially in the middle or center of the board here. This is a good move by our opponent. This should force a trade, or it might not necessarily do so. We could just jump on back here. Our opponent's idea here is if we take, they open up this and their rook would hit our queen. So I think we'll just go back instead to c7. If they take, we just take back with this bishop. This should keep our bishop defended as it gets onto this diagonal. It keeps this knight defended and also this weak pawn. Now they go for this attack. I would like to go for something like this. But first I think we might be forced to play h5, and our opponent doesn't quite have the idea here of playing g4, because then we take, and I think we should be fine. So let's try to shut down their attack first, and then we can play our own plans here. Now we do have this square here to jump in potentially. We will have to see how our opponent plays first though. They take, and this is a check, we have to take. This looks like an outpost. This game here is quite slow in terms of trading down pieces here, but there is a lot of tension, I think. They do take this outpost here. And now we have to come up with a good move. This would hit this rook like this, and we could look to attack our opponent. This knight does have some ideas of jumping in, and this was our plan all along. Just want to make sure there is no sack here. Takes, takes, and there is nothing more to capture. We would just hide on h7, I think. So let's get our rooks connected and our last piece into the game. Now this might be a move, because we don't have our knight here anymore. This. And if they move the queen, we might have this, for example. And if they push, we could take this pawn, for example. Or we could get a rook onto this file here, but we don't have many prospects because it's defended by a pawn. So this, I think, looks a lot better. Now this is also defended here, so at least in this position there is no sack on this e6 square. But we do have to make a mental note here, though there might come a time here when this does become an option. If this is played, we have a fork, or so I would like to say. Yes, we do, because we could start out with this. And either capture, we would follow up. They take. I think we would like to capture with the bishop. This seems like a powerful square for our bishop here. And now we would be hitting the rook. And this bishop here is hitting this square, so it's going to be difficult for our opponent to do a whole lot down there. Now I think I would like to look at something like this. Or we could reassess our options here in terms of attacking on their queen side. This, this, and this, sorry, this, and this. If they take, we threaten the bishop and an attack against their king. I think I like the idea here. Let's get aggressive. They do take. And now this A file might become a massive asset to us. If they go back, which does not quite prevent us from utilizing this A file. We don't quite cover D2 right now. But even still, if we do get their king up here, we could grab B2 here and even come on further into their position. I think this looks crushing. I'm not seeing a convincing defense. This doesn't quite work, I think. But let's have a quick look at it. If we take, they take, we take, and they block. So let's have a look here. Take block. We would have this, which would be a checkmate. So here I think this is somewhat of a bluff. We are able to capture this. But do we have an immediate queen move here? Not after this. So I think we'll start out with this move. They could block with the bishop, though, I'm noticing. But even still, we should be able to just bring in more pieces here. And this is looking like an avalanche. I'm not seeing an easy way of just preventing all of our threats here. They take this, and this should be first. We take, and this should be checkmate, and this should be checkmate. So I think this is a first mate. If this is played, then this is checkmate. The reason why this is checkmate is because the queen is pinned to the king, so they can't defend. Our opponent sees they are going to get checkmated here, and they resign. Thanks for the game, Flute Stewart. Now this brings us up to 1391 ELO. Thanks a lot for the game, Flute Stewart. Let's jump on ahead into the game review. So today we played with an accuracy of 83.6 and our opponent played with an accuracy of 67. We got a brilliant move today, and I'm curious to see where we did so. It might be the bishop sack at the end there, and I see we made 4 inaccuracies and we had 2 misses, so there is probably a lot to go through. Well, we had the Baudelaire attack, which you can see here. It immediately loses white's advantage. They have 0.29, and now it goes to equality. Simply because we get the option of kicking their bishop back, and then they lose their first move advantage. This is a book move, but after this, yeah, this was apparently a mistake, but we didn't capitalize correctly. This is an interesting idea. I did not see this, but this just loses the game. The best move here is king to f1, which is horrible, and then we get the bishop. So this was a tactical miss by us, but honestly this wasn't all that bad either, I think. Or actually it was, to be honest. I'm not going to try to convince myself of otherwise. Of anything else, because I did overlook their pawn push entirely. I just want to go back here quickly and have a look at what would have happened if they played this move, which I did look at. Here, queen to c7. And then what happens if queen to e2, protecting the pawn. Then this knight maneuver here to target the pawn would have been best, apparently. And then they should just castle, and we win the pawn. Or so I'd like to think, but this just keeps the defense. So apparently at the end of the line here, we should just push the pawn and get rid of their pawn here. Okay, this is quite deep, but it does make sense. Well, we got into this position. This was apparently the best move, pushing. I didn't like keeping their pawn here on e5, as it seemed to be quite powerful and it restricted our pieces. Here even we shouldn't have captured back. I think that's a bizarre computer move, playing a6. We played some okay moves here. Apparently this was not the best idea. Queen to c7 would have been better. Yeah, apparently that's because they had this fork here, which forced a trade which seems to have been a bit unfavorable to us. Well, they didn't go for that just out straight away. Here we had a winning idea, which is just a much earlier idea, or a much earlier variation of what we did later on. Essentially forcing the a file to open up and getting an attack against their king. Queen to e7 here, and then I'm not seeing the immediate best move here, but apparently this was not good. Let's say they play knight to e5, jumping in. We would have taken, they would have taken. Yes, we should have apparently just been down a pawn for a long while and argued this was a long-term asset. We played like this, which by itself didn't lose our entire advantage, but I think honestly our position wasn't that bad here, but the computer move was somewhat better. Still, it wanted us to play b5. We didn't. And here, yeah, it seems b5 was apparently crashing for a long while, or at least it was the best move. In this position we found it, and our opponent should have apparently went back with their bishop. Here, this was indeed the brilliant move, and here our opponent resigned because whatever move they would have played, the next move was going to be mate. Well, that's a great move for today, or a great game for today rather. It's been a while, I think, since we had a brilliant move. I can't quite remember if we have had one on this series yet, or in this series. Now, thanks a lot for the game once again, Flute Stuart from Scotland. Thank you all for watching the video, and I hope to see you all tomorrow. Bye bye!